My name is Bonfilia, and I graduated from college with a degree in programming, unlike most of my classmates, who tried to find a job after finishing their studies. I had already secured mine in my third year. I was lucky. A mid-sized software development company offered me a position after being impressed with my work during a summer internship. The salary was decent enough that I could afford to move into my own place right after graduation, but I didn't. Bonfilia, we were hoping you'd consider staying with us a little longer, my mom said one evening as we sat at the dinner table. My dad nodded beside her, looking a little uneasy. What do you mean? I thought you'd be happy to finally have the house to yourselves, I replied, puzzled by their request. My dad cleared his throat, as if choosing his words carefully. Well, sweetheart, the truth is, we've been struggling to cover all the bills lately. Your mom and I aren't getting any younger, and our expenses keep rising. My mom quickly added, if you stayed and maybe contributed a little to the household, it would really help us out. I looked at their worried faces. These were the people who had raised me, who had helped me get through college despite all the hardships. I had dreamed of having my own apartment for years, but could I really say no to them? How much would help? I asked. Relief washed over their faces instantly. Maybe $1,000 a month, my dad suggested. Bills, groceries, everyday expenses. And just like that, at 22 years old, I became the breadwinner of my family. I put the rest of my salary into a savings account, watching it steadily grow month after month. I didn't spend much on myself, just the essentials and the occasional small indulgence. Why buy things I didn't need? My sister, Severia, had a completely different philosophy. 7 years older than me, she was married to her college sweetheart, David, and they had a son, Germano. They lived in a fancy rented apartment on the other side of town and acted as if they were swimming in money, though that was far from the truth. Oh my God, Bonfilia, are you seriously wearing that t-shirt again? Severia said during one of her Sunday visits. She was sprawled out on our parents' couch, scrolling through her phone while David and Dad watched football and Mom played with Germano. I glanced down at my plain blue t-shirt. What's wrong with it? She rolled her eyes. I saw you wearing that in a Facebook photo from last year. Do you ever buy new clothes? A new collection came out a few weeks ago. I don't need new clothes. These are just fine, I replied, trying not to show my irritation. Severia scoffed. That's why you're still single. As if a lack of designer clothes was some kind of unforgivable character flaw. No guy wants a girl who looks like she shops at a thrift store. I bit my tongue instead of reminding her that, despite my growing savings, she and David were living paycheck to paycheck. Despite his well-paying job, their income vanished as quickly as it came: vacations, restaurants, designer brands, anything they felt like having that week. Severia worked part-time at a boutique, as she put it, just so I don't get bored. Later that day, as I was washing the dishes, Severia cornered me in the kitchen. Her tone had shifted from mocking to sickly sweet. Bonfilia, can I borrow $200? I turned to her. What for? Just a dress. She looked away. I've had my eye on it, but I'm a little short this month. I sighed. It wasn't the first time. And, of course, it wouldn't be the last. Sure, I said, drying my hands with a towel. You're the best. Severia hugged me quickly. That's why you're my favorite sister. I'm your only sister, I reminded her, but she was already typing something on her phone, probably texting someone that she could now afford that dress. I just sighed and went to my room. When I wasn't at my main job, I spent my evenings working on a side project, developing an app for a home security system. I believed it could revolutionize the way people monitored their homes. The app would integrate with existing camera systems, adding intelligent alerts and convenient controls that were sorely missing from the market. I was sitting in front of my monitor, deep in code, when I heard a familiar, slightly weary voice behind me. Bonfilia, it's almost midnight. Why are you still at the computer? I turned around. Mom stood in the doorway in her robe, arms crossed over her chest. You're driving up our electricity bill. Sorry, Mom, I'm just finishing something, I mumbled, not taking my eyes off the screen. I heard her walk back to the bedroom, and then my father's quiet but clear voice carried through. All she ever does is play those stupid games. No wonder she can't find a boyfriend, he added before the door clicked shut. I didn't bother correcting them. They wouldn't understand what I was working on anyway, and I didn't have the energy to explain. Sometimes, it was just easier to let people believe whatever they wanted to believe. I had no idea that my quiet life of saving money and writing code was about to be turned upside down. The first signs of trouble appeared on Tuesday evening when I came home from work. Our driveway was packed with cars, and a large cardboard box was propped against the front door. I squeezed my way inside, and froze. The living room was piled with stacked boxes, suitcases, and random furniture. My parents were standing there, while Severia was barking out orders, gesturing wildly like a commander on a battlefield. David emerged from the hallway, looking utterly defeated. His usually confident posture was slouched, and his shirt was wrinkled. What's going on? Are you moving? I asked, stopping in the doorway. Severia snapped her head up. David lost his job. I turned to look at him. He couldn't meet my eyes. What happened? It's complicated, he muttered. They call it creative accounting, Severia cut in. I felt my stomach tighten. You mean, he was stealing? Silence fell over the room. My parents exchanged awkward glances. It's terrible, Severia said sharply. But his friend, he should have understood. Instead, he betrayed David. The friend asked for the money back and fired him, I pointed out, trying to hold on to logic. That seems fair. Real friends don't do that. Her voice shook with indignation. They understand when you're in a tough spot. I closed my eyes, realizing that arguing with her was pointless. At dinner, Mom announced, Severia, David, and Germano will be staying with us. Just until they get back on their feet. I nodded without a word. I already knew what would happen next. And I was right. The nightmare of epic proportions began almost immediately. My quiet, orderly life collapsed under the chaos brought by Severia's family. David found a new job within 2 weeks, but as he loudly complained to anyone willing to listen, he was making exactly half of what he used to. As for Severia, she continued working part-time at the boutique, just enough hours to claim she was contributing, but in reality, her job barely helped with their finances. This chicken is so dry, Severia complained one evening at dinner, pushing her plate away. Mom, don't you know how to use seasoning? She sighed, folded her arms across her chest, and rolled her eyes. We used to eat at Bellissimo's every Thursday, and their food was amazing. Instead of defending her cooking or telling Severia to make dinner herself, Mom just nodded, almost apologetically. Sorry, sweetheart. I'll try to do better next time. I lowered my gaze to my plate, stabbed a piece of chicken, perfectly fine chicken, with my knife, and pressed my lips together, holding back a comment. Somehow, the entire dynamic of the house had shifted overnight. Severia had become the center of everyone's attention and concern. Her problems became everyone's problems. Her complaints turned into legitimate grievances that demanded immediate solutions. And me? I was just the ATM in the corner, paying the bills. One evening, I was working late on my security app when Severia barged into my room without knocking. I need to borrow $300, she declared, not even bothering to mask it with her usual fake sweetness this time. I pulled my eyes away from the screen. For what? Germano needs new shoes, and we want to take him to M Park this weekend. He's been so upset since we moved here. I sighed. Didn't David just get paid? We have other expenses, she snapped. Are you going to help or not? I gave in that time. But when she came back a week later, I finally pushed back. Maybe you should consider getting a full-time job. I suggested over dinner. Severia had once again asked me for money, right in front of the whole family, clearly expecting that I wouldn't refuse in public. The boutique is hiring. I saw a sign in their window. Her face instantly turned red. I can't believe how cruel you are, she hissed. You know I need to be available for Germano after school. Mom and Dad are always here, I pointed out calmly. They could watch him for a couple of hours. That's not the point, she shouted, threw her napkin onto the table, and stormed out of the room. David followed her, shooting me a disapproving look. Mom shook her head. Bonfilia, how could you be so heartless? Your sister is going through a tough time. We're all going through a tough time, I muttered, but no one was listening. Severia didn't speak to me for an entire week after that, and honestly, it felt more like a relief than a punishment. I used that quiet time to finally finish my security app. After months of sleepless nights and weekends spent hunched over my keyboard, I was finally ready to show it to someone. This is incredible, my boss, Mark, exclaimed as I demonstrated the app's features in his office. His eyes widened as I showed how it could detect specific movements, differentiate between humans and animals, and send customizable alerts. The user interface is so intuitive. And these algorithms. You developed all of this yourself? I nodded, trying not to look too proud. It was my side project for a while. Mark leaned back in his chair, studying me with newfound respect. Bonfilia, this could completely disrupt the home security market. My heartbeat quickened. Our company could dominate if we owned this, he continued. I held my breath. I'm prepared to offer you $500,000 for full ownership, plus a percentage of future sales, he said. What do you think? I kept my expression neutral. Despite the adrenaline rushing through me, I stayed composed. $500,000 plus royalties. It was more than I had ever dreamed of. That sounds fair, I managed to say, as if I negotiated six-figure deals every day. We shook hands, and I walked out of his office. A few days later, I was officially rich. But on my way home, I made an important decision. I wouldn't tell my family. If they found out, the money would disappear into the bottomless pit of Severia's shopping habits, or what my parents called necessary expenses. Living the way I wanted, that was what mattered now. This was my chance at freedom, and I wasn't going to let it slip away. That same evening, I reached out to my friend Sarah, a realtor who had helped one of my colleagues find an apartment. I want my own place, I said quietly over the phone, sitting in my car in the driveway. Something close to work, ready for immediate move-in. Can you help me? I already have a few places in mind. Let's meet tomorrow after work. When I stepped inside the house, I immediately felt the tension in the air. Everyone was gathered in the living room. It was an unusual sight for a weekday evening. They all fell silent the moment I walked in. Their faces held a mix of determination and awkwardness. Bonfilia, we need to talk, Mom patted the couch beside her. I sat down cautiously. What's going on? Dad cleared his throat. We've been going over our expenses, and things are tight. There are 5 adults and a child in the house now. The utility bills have gone up a lot, and groceries. You wouldn't believe how much food a growing boy needs. Mom nodded. We were hoping you could contribute a little more to the household expenses. The $1,000 you've been giving us isn't covering everything anymore. I looked around. My parents looked embarrassed, but hopeful. Severia was examining her manicure, pretending this wasn't her idea. But I knew. This was David. At least he had the decency to look uncomfortable. Are Severia and David contributing? I asked. My parents exchanged glances. Well, they're in a tough spot right now, Mom said quietly. And you're single, with no dependents. You can afford to help a little more. I took a deep breath, silently counting to 10. How much more? We were thinking, maybe 2,000 a month? Dad suggested carefully. Laugh, cry, or scream. I simply nodded. Fine. Starting this month. Severia finally looked up. A small smile played on her lips. She thought she had won. But didn't she realize her victory wouldn't last? 3 days later, I met Sarah at a beautiful residential complex 10 minutes from my office. The one-bedroom apartment she showed me was perfect, modern, bright, on the top floor, with a small balcony. I used part of the money from the deal to make the down payment. I signed the papers that very day. As I secretly furnished my new apartment, I started noticing something strange happening at my parents' house. During dinner, Mom, Dad, and Severia kept exchanging odd glances, as if they were involved in some secret plan. David remained silent, focused on chewing his food and occasionally helping Germano cut his meat. Something was definitely going on. 2 days later, I came home from work and found a pile of my belongings stacked in the hallway. My books, clothes, laptop, boxes of documents, and even my childhood stuffed bear had been unceremoniously dumped into one heap. What the hell? I muttered, dropping my bag and heading straight for my bedroom. Only it wasn't my bedroom anymore. Germano was sitting on my bed, now covered with superhero-themed sheets, playing a video game. The walls, where my programming certificates once hung, were now decorated with cartoon character posters. My desk, the very one where I had created my security app, was gone. In its place stood a small child's table, cluttered with crayons, figurines, and drawing books. Germano looked up from the screen, his eyes bright with excitement. Aunt Bonfilia, he exclaimed happily. Look at my new room. Isn't it cool? I didn't even have time to respond before Severia appeared behind me. Oh, you're home, she said, without the slightest hint of embarrassment. I turned around slowly. What is going on? My voice was deathly calm, though inside, I was already burning with rage. We moved Germano into your room, she shrugged, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. He needed more space for his toys and schoolwork. And where exactly am I supposed to sleep now? I asked, shifting my gaze to Mom, who had just appeared behind Severia, nervously wringing her hands. Bonfilia, sweetheart, we thought. She hesitated, choosing her words. Since you're hardly ever home, always at work or on your computer, maybe it wouldn't be too much trouble for you to use the couch in the living room? I looked at her. Then at Severia, who wasn't even trying to hide her smug satisfaction. So you moved all my things, without asking me? We knew you'd make a fuss if we asked, Severia interjected. And Germano really needed a room. His old one was barely bigger than a closet. Speaking of his old room, why don't I take that one? I asked coldly. Severia and Mom exchanged that same look, the one I had grown to hate. Well, Mom swallowed nervously. We thought Severia could use it as a walk-in closet. You know how much clothing she has. And there's just no space in David's room. I stared at them, momentarily speechless. They had kicked me out of my own bedroom, the one I had since childhood. The one I was essentially paying for with my $2,000 monthly contribution. All for a walk-in closet. For Severia. Severia, who wasn't contributing a single cent to the household. I glanced at her perfectly coordinated designer outfit, then at my belongings dumped in the hallway. and something inside me snapped. But instead of screaming or crying, as they probably expected, I simply shrugged. "You know what?" I said calmly. "That's fine." Severia smirked. "Oh, don't start," she scoffed. "What, are you going to move into your imaginary apartment now?" "Come on, Bonfilia, we all know you don't have an apartment." I met her gaze. "Actually," I said slowly, "I do." Her smile vanished. "What?" "I bought it last week," I said evenly. "I was planning to tell you all this weekend. But I guess you just made my decision easier." Mom and Severia stared at me as if I had suddenly grown a second head. "You bought an apartment?" Mom repeated, her voice trembling. "How? With what money?" "That doesn't matter," I cut her off, turning toward the stairs. "What matters is that I'm moving out. Today." In the living room, I dialed the number of a moving company and booked their earliest available slot. Fortunately, that was tomorrow morning. Then I called my boss and requested a day off. The whole time, my family hovered nearby. Their expressions ranged from shock to growing unease. "Bonfilia, you can't be serious," Dad finally spoke up, emerging from the garage. "I'm completely serious," I replied, finishing my call with the movers. "They'll be here at 7 a.m. tomorrow to pick up my things." Mom paled. "But we need to talk about this," she said, crossing her arms. "If you're upset about the room, we can figure something out. Maybe Germano can share it with someone?" "It's not about the room," I cut her off. "It's about respect. About boundaries. About the fact that I pay $2,000 a month to live here, yet you still treat me like I matter less than everyone else in this house." Severia, who had been unusually quiet until now, suddenly leaned forward. "Wait. You actually bought an apartment?" Her voice was a mix of curiosity and suspicion. "With what money?" "You're just a junior developer." I didn't answer her directly. "I'm going to pack what's left of my things," I said, walking past them toward the pile in the hallway. The next morning, the movers arrived exactly at 7 a.m. I pointed them to the stack of boxes, which had grown significantly overnight as I gathered the rest of my belongings from around the house. My family silently watched as the men carried the boxes out one by one. "Where exactly is this apartment?" Dad finally asked as I did a final check to make sure I hadn't forgotten anything. "Near the office," I answered vaguely. "How much did it cost?" Severia demanded. "And how could you even afford it?" I turned to face them. They were all standing in the living room, watching me like I was something strange and incomprehensible. "That's honestly none of your business. We're your family," Mom threw up her hands. "Of course it's our business." I shook my head. "Family works both ways, Mom," I said calmly. "And for a long time in this house, it's only worked one way." "What's that supposed to mean?" Severia asked warily. "It means I'm not going to be your ATM anymore," I said. "I won't keep handing over money that no one appreciates and that is never used responsibly." "So you're just abandoning us?" Mom's voice trembled, her eyes glistening with tears. "What about the bills? The groceries? What about them?" I shrugged. "Severia and David are grown adults. They have jobs. Let them contribute for once in their lives. We can barely afford our own expenses." Severia protested. "Then maybe you should reconsider your spending habits," I suggested coolly. Severia's face went pale. And then she said something so unbelievable that it almost made me laugh. "You know what I think?" Her voice turned sickly sweet. "You should give us your apartment." I blinked. "What?" "We need it more than you do," she continued, as if it were the most logical argument in the world. We have a child. I couldn't hold it in. I laughed. The sheer audacity was almost impressive. No, Severia, I said, wiping the corners of my eyes. I'm not giving you my apartment. I paused, looking her straight in the face. In fact, I'm not giving you anything ever again. At that moment, one of the movers appeared in the doorway. We've loaded everything up. Are you ready to go? I nodded and grabbed my purse. Ready. Bonfilia, please. Mom took a step forward, her voice pleading. Don't leave like this. I sighed. I'll call you in a couple of days, I said, making no promises beyond that farewell. And I walked out the door. I followed the moving truck along the road to my new apartment, feeling a growing sense of liberation with every mile that separated me from my parents' house. For the first time in my adult life, I was putting myself first. And it felt unbelievably good. The next few days were a whirlwind. I unpacked, ordered furniture, set up internet and utilities. I kept my phone off most of the time, knowing it would be flooded with messages from my family. When I finally turned it on, my suspicions were confirmed. Dozens of missed calls and texts. Ranging from angry to pleading. From guilt-tripping to outright accusations of betrayal. After a week of silence, I decided to visit my parents' house. I wanted to have a calm, reasonable conversation about boundaries and expectations. As I pulled into the driveway that Saturday morning, I saw the curtains twitch. They were watching me. I had barely reached the door when it swung open. Mom pulled me into a tight hug. Thank God you're back, she said, relief washing over her face. We were so worried. Dad appeared behind her, looking both happy and embarrassed. In the living room, Severia and David were already seated. Germano sat on the floor, completely absorbed in his toys. I took a deep breath. I'm not moving back in, I said immediately, before they could get the wrong idea. I just came to talk. We understand, Mom nodded, pulling me inside. We've been thinking a lot too. I doubted that. But I sat down anyway. Bonfilia, Dad began, we know we made a mistake. He looked at me with a heavy expression. Your room is yours again. You can move back in whenever you want. Germano is back in his old room, Severia quickly added. And I didn't turn it into a walk-in closet. I can just hang my clothes in our bedroom. I glanced at their expectant faces. I appreciate that, I said calmly. But I'm happy in my new place. Mom leaned forward. But we miss you. I gave her a gentle smile. You miss me, or? She looked away. We could visit you there, she said quickly. I frowned. That was the real reason for their sudden change of heart. You need my money, I corrected her. No one denied it. We could work something out. Severia said slowly. Like what? Like, you could keep your apartment but maybe still help us with expenses. I held back a laugh. Or, she continued, her voice full of hope, we could move into your apartment, and you could have this house back. This time, I couldn't hold it in. I laughed. The sheer audacity was almost impressive. No, Severia, I said calmly. I'm not giving you my apartment or my money. Her face twisted with outrage. But that's not fair, she exclaimed. You're so selfish. How could you even afford an apartment? She narrowed her eyes. You must have been hiding money from us for years. I shook my head. I sold the app one developed. Silence fell over the room. What? Mom whispered. The security program I worked on at night. The one you all thought was just me playing video games. I paused for a moment. My boss bought it for $500,000. I looked at them. plus royalties. David blinked in shock. $500,000? Mom looked pale. Why didn't you tell us? I shrugged. Because I knew exactly what would happen. I turned to Severia. You would have found a million reasons why you deserved that money more than I did. No one could argue with that. So, you're just abandoning us? Severia hissed. After everything we've done for you? I stood up. And what exactly have you done for me, Severia? She opened her mouth, but I didn't give her a chance to make excuses. Taken money you never repaid? Mopped my clothes? Moved my things without asking? I let the silence hang. She had nothing to say. I turned to my parents. I will always be your daughter. And your sister, Severia. I took a deep breath. But I will no longer be your bank. I turned and walked toward the door. Bonfilia. Mom jumped up, her voice shaking. Wait. But I didn't stop. I opened the door. Ungrateful. Severia shouted after me. Selfish. Heartless. But for the first time, their words didn't hurt me. 6 months passed. I hadn't spoken to my family. They had tried to contact me, but only with financial requests disguised as reconciliation. Through mutual acquaintances, I heard they were still living together. Still complaining about money. And now, about how I had abandoned them. Meanwhile, I was thriving. My apartment was perfect. My career was skyrocketing. And my royalties from the app kept growing. I started traveling. Bought beautiful clothes, though I was sure Severia wouldn't approve of a single thing in my wardrobe. And I even started dating someone. Someone who appreciated my practicality. Sometimes, I wondered, did I do the right thing? But then I remembered how they had treated me, not as a family member to be respected, but as a resource to be used. And I knew leaving wasn't selfish. It was self-preservation. What do you think of this story? Leave a comment below, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and give it a like. See you soon.